Hello, everybody. Welcome to the WrestleWatch podcast, the only podcast that covers the world of free agency and professional wrestling. I'm Doug.
And I'm Ryan here. How you doing, Doug, today?
That's pretty good. We had a busy Mother's Day weekend. Very, very busy. So this is actually being recorded a little bit later. We're doing it Monday morning instead, just because that's what worked out for everyone. How was your weekend?
It was also pretty busy. Yeah. Was driving up and down the East Coast, working. So it's a little bit of a nice respite of a Monday morning right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we needed it. Sometimes it's good to just take the weekend and then come back on Monday, think about everything. We've had some time to look at the tier list and formulate our thoughts. So, this is good.
Yeah, I guess this is the Monday morning quarterback edition of WrestleWatch.
Absolutely.
So we can look back on this weekend and decide where did we go wrong? Well, I don't think that there is many things that changed much this past week. We do have 5 people that have moved up and down the tier list. But first, I wanted to go over something that was famous that you had, Doug, was the Magnificent Seven. Is that correct?
The Magnificent Seven, which is starting to collapse. I would say most of the people have now re-signed with WWE, but my Magnificent Seven, for those who don't know, it was a list of 7 WWE male wrestlers. I just did the guys for now because at the time I didn't really have a strong feel on the women in WWE and kind of their motivations and where they were going. But for the men, I felt I had 7 guys on the men's roster that I thought could be potential AEW jumps. And by potential, I meant I could see AEW offering them money that WWE may not want to meet.
Yeah.
And of those 7, it was Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, Finn Balor, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, AJ Styles, and Seth Rollins. Those were the 7 names. Most of those have resigned. And to be clear, I never intended to make anyone think that, I think all 7 of these people are jumping. I just felt that these are 7 people that we're going to see some bidding wars over.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wrong on that because it seemed like a lot of these people have just re-signed before they went into free agency. They didn't really play the market. They may have intrinsically played WWE and AEW against each other in the sense that they were probably saying to WWE, "Hey, I can go here, I can do this," but we never actually saw the full-on, Mercedes Moné, Mercedes Renato, go back and forth bidding war where we actually see her talking to both sides. We didn't really get that with any of these names.
Yeah.
But Seth Rollins has re-signed, Finn Balor's re-signed, Drew McIntyre's re-signed. So now it's really coming down to Kevin Owens, Sami, AJ, who I don't really necessarily think is going to leave, but I think he was worth mentioning. And then obviously who am I missing?
Sheamus.
And then Sheamus. And Sheamus has returned, but I'm going to keep my eye on him. I mean, I feel like those are still the names of people I could see potentially being bidding wars, but you never know.
Yeah. I mean, so just to my thought also with it is that Drew McIntyre's contract allegedly had run out back in January. So they kind of did some catch up with him. And then Seth Rollins' contract was about to run out next month. And so they jumped to him. And then Finn Balor's the one of those 3 that have re-signed. That's a little bit interesting because his contract was supposed to be ending at the end of this year. And he was the first of the trio to get announced as re-signed. So I think it does lead into the idea that maybe he was an easy one to conquer, to get the ball rolling on this group of people.
And to be fair, they are signing for reportedly big money contracts. And you could argue that they're getting these big money contracts because WWE knows that they're valuable outside of WWE. So they're trying to lock them down and keep them away from the competition. So you could argue that, in the sense they are kind of using the leverage because they probably would not be getting these deals if alternatives were not available.
Yeah, to keep them out of free agency, not let the market dictate what their price is going to be.
Yes,
Um,
and obviously Becky Lynch right now is the other one that everyone's
yeah.
talking about. I didn't include her in my list, but she's probably one of the bigger ones.
Well,
Um,
yeah. I mean, if you made it not male wrestlers but men, well, she is the man, so she could be included.
absolutely,
You know.
absolutely, yeah. And to be clear, it's like the reason I didn't include women is just because it was a hard time. I felt like it was hard to see what AEW was going to do with their women's roster, how much value they put on women's wrestlers, because I did this before Mercedes Moné signed.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Mercedes-Sance or some better term that I can cook up later.
yeah, absolutely. So it was a different time in that regard. So I had
Yeah,
to kind of now I can kind of make different inferences based off that, but as we said, free agency season is ending, so maybe at another time we can revisit that.
yeah. So this is now the segue into my new list. Okay, we're gonna try to see if we can strike lightning twice.
Yes.
Maybe this time we'll be more successful of people that might actually leave this time. But I think this is still a list that's very similar to the Magnificent Seven, but this is going to be from the AEW perspective of people on the current AEW roster. Or well, there's one name that's on here that when I first crafted this list was on the roster at the very least, but still is not formally signed somewhere new. So this would be it's 8 names that I have, or 9 names really. We haven't come up with a catchy name yet for it. Uh, but this is the list of people that I see on the current AEW roster that I think could jump in the next year to WWE. Could, of course.
Mhm.
And I think that there would be a little bit of interest from both sides to have them. Here they are: Buddy Matthews, Danhausen, Chris Jericho, the Hardys, Malakai Black, Miro, Samoa Joe, and Ricky Starks. Now, I know that some of those names might seem a little bit odd to some people, and there might not be some of those names might be names that might not get as much interest from AEW to keep them, but they're still all are with AEW except for Matt Hardy, of course, who let his contract run out and did not pick up the contract from the table that AEW was allegedly offering. So I would say that all these people, just by the nature that AEW has not tried to release them and they have not seemed to be asking for a release, there has to be some interest in AEW in keeping all these people. So that's my I guess it's 9 names because the Hardys are 2 people. Doug, how are you feeling on that list? How about we just start at the top? Does that make it easy?
Yeah. Do you want me to give my overall thoughts, or do you want me to just go each one as we go through them?
How about just give me a broad stroke overall thought on that, and then we can go individually.
I agree with most of them that I could definitely see value in WWE with them, and then some of them obviously I could see them just wanting to leave AEW for various reasons and go back to WWE. There are there's one that I do question a little bit for a couple reasons. I'll talk about that one when we get to it. But we can go through the list, and I think we can start with
Yeah,
Buddy.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure already knowing, I think who that one person is.
Okay, let's
Uh,
see.
Buddy Matthews. I'm gonna guess not the person. Am I
Not the
correct?
person. Not the
Not the
person.
person. Okay, cool. So Buddy Matthews, he's actually on the tier list currently, and might as well mention it now. He will be covered later on in the segment about who's gone up and down the tier list because he went from D tier down to F tier this week. Um, I think basically the feeling on Buddy Matthews is that he hasn't been utilized to his fullest potential in AEW. We've seen some flashes of singles glory for him when he's been used in singles matches, but he hasn't been getting those opportunities that much. So that's part of the reason why he might be looking to leave and see how things could be on the other side of the fence. We've covered the past few weeks now about how WWE has been utilizing people that have gone from AEW to WWE. So it's possible that he'll be at least where he is on this part of the roster if he goes back to WWE. The other factor that has been mentioned a few times, his contract is a little bit long, but it's possible, of course, that he could ask for his release. And of course, his significant other Rhea Ripley is one of the probably best held wrestlers in WWE at the current moment. So those are like my bullet points. Doug, how are you thinking and feeling about Buddy Matthews being on this list?
I think he's good to have on this list. I agree. He's one that I think wants to go back to WWE for various reasons. I don't even necessarily think it's because his wife is there, but I think that's definitely part of it. I also just think that he does. I just don't think he's necessarily shown a lot of fire and desire to be there. He's definitely shown more than, say, Malakai Black has,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that it makes sense that I would say he's probably one to go on this list for sure. But I agree that he is under a long contract, and I don't know what those options are. And I think that's probably a large reason why people are moving him down to F. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but I think he's definitely one that I don't see sticking around after this contract.
Yeah, I generally feel that way right now. I think that he could get used very well in a singles division because I think he matches up very well with the current crop that are in the international continental scene, we could call it. Um, but it doesn't seem like they're utilizing him in that way. They're kind of using him as the third lackey of the House of Black.
Yeah,
Um, the next person, I think that this is the person. I have Danhausen. Is this the person?
this is not the person.
This is not the person. Wow. Okay,
No.
that's surprising to me.
No, I agree completely. I think Danhausen would thrive in WWE's environment, to be completely honest. And when he came to AEW, I initially felt that he was not a good fit. But
Mhm.
to their credit, though, I think they used him as well as you could use him in AEW, which is very sparingly because he is an act I think that would get very, very old very, very quick in AEW.
Mhm.
And they just sprinkled him in. They had him pop up every now and then. He's not been around lately. He's very famously very, very close with CM Punk, so it's not surprising that, he's been kind of salty on social media lately. And I think that he's someone that has an act that would translate well to WWE.
Now, of course, I will counter the CM Punk mention by pointing out, of course, that Team AEW for Anarchy in the Arena includes FTR. So it might be that, but I do agree with you in the principle that Danhausen seems to be someone that has taken his CM Punk alignment a little bit personally and how he's been acting lately.
And he hasn't
He
been on, has he been on AEW television since Punk left?
he has and he hasn't. So he was being teased to return, and he had all those like Halloween like little jingle stuff, and I think that he just didn't come back, or he came back for one match and then nothing happened from there. Allegedly, there just was like not interest in his story, or people forgot in the booking department or something. I can't remember what the specifics were, but essentially it's not that he is disgruntled is why he is not being booked. Allegedly it's that AEW just isn't as interested in what he's pitching. uh
I understand his value. I
mhm.
really do. But it's just he's not, for me personally, I'm not a big fan of what he's offering, and in the sense of what he can do for AEW.
Yeah.
I don't think he fits in AEW personally, but
Yeah.
I do think he can fit in WWE, and I think that if I honestly, I think that's the perfect environment for him. If you want me to be completely honest.
Well, yeah. So, like, when I was thinking about this and I was going through the entire roster, I have a long list in addition to the short list. And Danhausen really stuck out to me because of two reasons. Not because of the disgruntled stuff, not because of any of the CM Punk stuff, but because of two reasons. One, he never got an opportunity to show what he could do in the ring in AEW. He was just used as a mascot, essentially. Now, he was injured for part of that time, and maybe some argue that he's not at the level of wrestling as AEW now is demanding of people. But I think at the time that he came in, he still had value in ring, and that I still think that there are some wrestlers that are kind of at his skill level that are being featured pretty well in AEW. So that's point one for me. Point two is he is a merch machine. Um, I think that I think that with the behemoth of WWE, that they would really push him as one of these prime, not to excuse the pun, but prime comedy acts of WWE. I think that he would do extremely well in that environment. He could not wrestle as much just because they don't require it as much over there. Just have silly skits and segments for weeks on end. And look, the people that are at the top of WWE's merch board are CM Punk and Cody Rhodes, and he could make it 3 for 3 of former AEW guys.
You ready for my hot take?
Yeah.
I think the ability to move merch is probably the most single overrated aspect of a professional wrestler in today's environment. We are now in a world where TV rights fees are exploding for sports. I think that it has gotten to the point that, especially with WWE and probably very soon with AEW, that they could give away every single piece of ticket, or every single piece of merch. They can give away every single ticket, and the company would still be profitable based off of their media rights deals and pay-per-views.
I
And
yeah.
and and because of that, I understand that it merch sales do indicate other things. They indicate how popular someone is. Having said that, I don't know that it's necessarily a one-to-one translation because I don't know that Danhausen is necessarily a ratings draw, even if he is a merch draw. I don't know that Danhausen is a pay-per-view draw. And because of that, I don't think it is a one-to-one translation at all. And I
Yeah.
think that that's why I think that following merch in today's climate is not necessarily the right way to go about it. Would it have been in the 90s? Absolutely. I just don't think it is now.
Yeah, that's fair. Fair enough to point out. I do think that there are probably some old heads in WWE still who might be looking at it
Oh
as
yeah.
such, you
Oh,
know?
they absolutely are. And I think that I think we see that even today where we're still seeing the idea of house shows getting pushed when they are a money loser. All
Yeah.
they do is, I understand that the idea of pushing the brand around and making sure brand awareness is there, but that's more time on the road. That's more strain on your body just for these, small markets that aren't even making tape.
Yeah.
And, and, but once again, and a lot of the people that are probably on this list you're going through would love to work these loops so they feel like they're doing more and working and not
Yeah.
just sitting around. But it's also that's the two different mindsets where it's like one person's like wants to kind of preserve their body and just have more time at home and they see that as a value. And then
Mhm.
others, they just they need to work. I mean, some people just have that mindset where they can't just be idle, and I understand that.
Yeah, I think that these are all the ones that are really into the Triple H mindset of what the grind is.
Yeah,
Um, uh,
absolutely.
and also, I just wanted to mention that there was something that came out about you're speaking about the house shows thing. It sounds like it's possible that I think some people interpreted this news about UFC's Dana White coming out and saying that they're trying to package shows at the same arena for Power Slap, UFC and WWE, like having WWE on a Sunday for a weekend. Some people interpreted that as pay-per-views. I interpreted that as house shows. So I think it's possible that WWE is going to try to find a way to make them less unprofitable. But there's probably a better word for that. I just couldn't remember.
No, I will say this. I do think that there is a reason that AEW started on Saturdays and moved to
Mm-hmm.
Sundays. And I think it's just because Sundays are a better TV day,
They
a better
are,
TV
yeah.
night. So would I be stunned if they're moving pay-per-views back to Sundays? I would not. In
Oh
fact,
no,
it might
yeah.
make a lot of sense, but we already know they do run these house shows on Sundays as it is, so it would make sense, especially logistically if they're kind of streamlining everything with TKO to have, UFC on Saturday uh and then
House show or
WWE on
pay per
Sunday.
view, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
That would make a lot of sense regardless of what it is. So I guess we'll see.
yeah.
It could also
Um,
just be Dana White talking.
it could be. He's never done that before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And been sued over it. Anyway, how about we go to the next name here, which is okay, so now I think that this might be the one, since Danhausen wasn't the one. It's Chris Jericho.
This is the one.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
So, yeah, I would like to do my pitch first, and then I would like to hear your counter offer.
sure.
Your cross-examination. So Chris Jericho is on this list not because he is a disgruntled person. He doesn't seem that way whatsoever. He's not on this list because he is underutilized. In fact, not just a month ago, people were saying he was overutilized and needed to take a break. And then the learning tree happened, and we all gawked at him for how he was able to do it again. He's on this list because he has had a history of jumping. He's had a history of taking time off and trying something else. And I think that his contract is supposed to be up within the next year, I believe. And I could see him wanting to do one final run and get that Hall of Fame induction over in WWE. I don't think that it is highly likely that he will do this. And I think that this might be stepping on your counterpoint a little bit. I don't think that's highly likely because he has been so entrusted with power and trust at AEW. I'll now give the floor to you, Dr. Doug.
Sure. So a couple things. One, uh, his contract is up, but it's not up till December 2025. So he's got a little over a year. That's one part.
Noted.
Yeah. Now, having said that, he is not just talent at AEW. He is an employee, and he, as you said before, he does have a lot of influence. He does have Tony's ear. On top of that, he does not get along with a lot of people in WWE. I think he's famously not been a big fan of Triple H.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's notable that he re-signed with AEW right when Triple H took over. And obviously, he's not a big fan of CM Punk and has not done well with him. And he called him a cancer, famously after Brawl Out. I think that he now had to kind of back you up though a little bit though. I do think he would benefit from going back to WWE. Absolutely. I think that would be a fresh coat of paint for him. He needs a fresh coat of paint. Because he's a guy who in WWE would go away for a long time. And famously, the one thing that he used to do was he would work house shows only so that he
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be on TV.
Yes.
And that's probably something he needs. He needs to just go away for a good 6 months and come back.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he's not doing it right now for various reasons. And it's okay. I mean, let's be honest, the learning tree thing has worked.
Yeah.
He's turned the tide in the last couple of weeks, and he's turned it into something that's actually working. But I do think it would have been better if he just went away for a little bit and then came back. And maybe he realizes that, and after this current run he's on, he will go back to WWE, and I think they would take him back because I think they're smart enough to take him back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think generally, I think that I lean towards him likely staying with AEW and continuing to have his influential role in AEW. Maybe they do some agreement where he gets his Hall of Fame induction, on the side, just like they did with Billy Gunn. But I still think that he belongs on the list, and he gives a little bit of he makes it not just the same kind of person on the list for that matter too.
Absolutely.
So the next two people we're just going to package together, it's the Hardys. One of them has already left AEW, but he had the contract on the table, Matt Hardy. The other one, Jeff Hardy, his contract is allegedly up quite soon. I think that they speak for themselves. Doug, what do you think?
Well, I think that both Hardys should leave AEW. I think
Mm-hmm.
that they've done everything that they can do there. I understand there was a contract for Matt Hardy already. I'm guessing it wasn't a very big one. It was probably, similar to what he had. And he knew that the Hardys have value. Say whatever you want about them. They have value, and they have value when they go places. And
Yep.
then, especially in WWE, where it's a company that really thrives on the moments, and those big returns are the moments that they love the most. So
Yes.
I think that the Hardys going back to WWE would make a lot of sense to me,
Oh
even if
yeah.
it is for just one final run. I think I see that happening, and that probably is why Matt Hardy is working pay per appearance in TNA because he's just waiting for Jeff's contract to come due, so that they
Ooh.
can negotiate together. Whether and then
Mm.
it may be staying in TNA, who knows? But I think that they are a better package deal
Hmm.
from a negotiating standpoint. I think that's the plan.
Yeah, I have no further thoughts. That's exactly what I was thinking with them. So I think we can hop over to Malakai Black here, which as we talked a little bit with Buddy Matthews, he has been a slightly disgruntled figure in his booking, allegedly been not wanting to take too many pins. Um, could I see him going back to WWE? Well, with the new regime, yes, I could. I think if it was the old regime, he would not be going back. Um, but with the new regime, I think it's possible that he goes back. Of course, to mention the caveat with this, he is another one of these people with a long contract. But the point of his contract is that the last few years are option years. We believe that he is within that option year renewal period. So he could at any year leave AEW. So, Doug, what are your thoughts with Malachi Black?
Yeah, and the thing with him is I do think Tony Khan has shown that he's willing to let people go and not execute on the option years if he really feels they want to go. Because we saw that with Cody, we saw that with William Regal,
Andrade. Yeah.
Andrade. I think that that's probably going to happen, and it's funny because clearly the big talking point, obviously, right now with Malachi Black is that he doesn't want a job.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to lose, and I think I saw a stat the other day that he's had 12 singles matches in AEW and he's only lost one, and that was to Cody Rhodes,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and
which
that was part of
was
a part of a series of matches where he won every other one.
yes, and that was years ago, and this was years ago, obviously at this point. So now he's going to have this match with Copeland, but it is going to be a gimmick match, so maybe that's another reason for him to lose. But he does seem to be allergic to just losing a straight up singles match,
Yeah.
and so he seems to be difficult to work with, perhaps. And that's why he has such weird booking because they're kind of working around him, and that's why he's always in these trios matches. That's just me speculating, but I don't think I'm wrong with that.
Yeah, but
And I think that he's gonna go. I think he will go back. I just think he doesn't seem happy. He seems bitter, and he doesn't want to be there. So, yeah,
yeah, and I would point out that this is why he's on this list because I think that also there is interest from AEW in keeping him, obviously because by the facts that number one, they have not released him, even if he's asked for it. And number two, they've given him multiple opportunities with titles. Now it seems with the trios belts, he was given the opportunity to hold those. And now it seems possible that he might win the TNT title at the end of the month here. I still call it a 50-50 shot on who's going to win that matchup, just because it's. I think Copeland still has some juice in that run. Um,
yeah.
but
I'm not a fan of the direction they're going with this, with Copeland possibly being possessed, but we'll see where they go with it.
yeah, the next one here is Miro. Again, pretty self-explanatory. A lot of the same kinds of things that we're talking about with the other people. Doesn't seem to like losing. Has a kind of long contract ahead of him still, but again, as we said, that doesn't necessitate him not being able to leave. It's been reported before that they've gone to him with ideas for booking, and he has just said, "Not going to work for me, brother," and not taking those opportunities. So Miro, he's the next person on the list.
So he's one where he's similar to Malachi Black, but also a little different. I think that he's got a similar mindset in the sense that he's trying to protect himself. He's trying to make sure that he is presented well. He
Mm-hmm.
has an idea of what he wants to be and do, and he's making sure that's executed. Having said that, he doesn't. he's not a guy that I think is like clamoring to go back to WWE though either. Like
No.
he's already re-signed once
Yes.
with AEW.
Yeah.
Um, so because of that reason alone, I think that he's not in the same camp as Malakai Black. Having said that, I do think that he's someone who would go back if the opportunity presented itself and it looked like a good option. And for him right now, if they gave him the right pitch, I think he would go just because right now, obviously, he's not getting creatively what he would like in AEW. And, both sides just don't seem to be coming to terms on what they want to do.
Yeah, and I would also mention that right now, I believe that his reason for not being on TV is due to some issues regarding immigration with the separation that he's going through. So I don't think that right now it's due to creative issues, but it has been in the past due to creative issues.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with him.
The next one here is a little bit interesting. It's Samoa Joe. He's been kind of mercenary at times, so
Hmm.
it wouldn't surprise me to see him leave AEW. I think that he seems to enjoy his time in AEW though, and he's been pushed extremely well in AEW, obviously with the world title and everything. Um, but I could see him, being given interest in WWE now that he's had this AEW run. No, of course, famously, WWE was just having him be a commentator for quite some time, even though obviously he could still go in the ring. But now maybe that they've seen his ability to go again, maybe they will have interest in him. Doug, what do you think about Samoa Joe?
Yeah, and I think I agree. And I would also add that I think that he has kind of done everything he could do in AEW. I mean, he had that world title run, which is, that's kind of the pinnacle probably for him in the company. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's ever going to peak higher than that. So at this point, what we could see is maybe AEW not fighting so hard to keep him. So if
Yeah.
WWE really wants him, I think they could probably get him.
Yeah, definitely. And the last one here is Ricky Starks,
So
who
Rick,
is on the tier list right
yes.
now. He is in B tier, which I personally think is quite high. I
I
don't
really
see.
don't, but okay.
I think that like there's just been like some of it has been supposition from people saying that they had a conversation with him on the side and all those kinds of things, and like I don't know. I think that's still kind of high, but still, Ricky Starks. How about you do the pitch then, Doug? Because
Yeah.
you are possibly one of the biggest people on Starks Watch.
Yes, I've been monitoring Ricky Starks for well over a year, maybe 2 years at this point. I have to think about it. But he is someone who I think would fit fantastically in WWE, first of all. But I also think he fits fantastic in AEW. I think he's a great fit for this company. It just hasn't worked out for him. Like it always seems like something happens, whether it's an injury or some creative fluff or something just doesn't work right. And it's really, really frustrating because I think he is really great. And so much so that if it were up to me, I would be trying to figure out a way to make him be the person who takes the belt off Swerve.
Hmm.
Like
Okay.
I think he would be the perfect person to do it, to be completely honest. Because, you know, I don't want like this isn't what the show does, but I'm not trying to do a booking thing here, but it's like the idea of Swerve losing to Osprey is just awful. I cannot get behind that whatsoever. I think the dynamics are all wrong. It's terrible, but I think Ricky Starks would be the absolute perfect person to do it.
I like the idea of Osprey.
No, no, no. I cannot agree
I
with that.
I don't think at all in, but I like the idea of it
No,
still. Just down the line sometime. I think that
maybe.
that's I think that's one of the,
I don't think it
that's
should be Swerve.
that's one of the problems I find with people when they think about who's gonna dethrone Swerve is that every single person, everybody's like, no, but it's like
Yeah.
it has to be somebody.
I know. I also hate the fact that, and I granted, I understand I just did it, but I also hate the fact that so much of Swerve's discussion is about like who's gonna take the belt off him after he just won the thing like less than a month ago. So
Yeah,
I
but
feel awful about that too.
yeah, but that just like that's natural for any title reign. I would say, like, like when MJF started his title reign, and even though it was like going to be well over a year afterwards, and I think most people knew that it was going to be almost a year afterwards because the bidding war 2024 thing. I think that everybody at that moment was still thinking like, oh yeah, so December 2023, who's going to beat him? Like, it's natural to wonder about that. And I think if you don't have interest in who's going to beat somebody for their belt, then there's just no interest in the reign. That's my opinion. But I understand the hesitation of saying like, oh yeah, wow, we got Swerve. I don't want to play with him anymore. Yeah, I understand the thought process with that feeling of
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it with this list. Yeah, with Ricky Starks, just to just give my thoughts and feelings on it. I don't see him staying with AEW. So even though I think that he's high up the tier list for what we know right now, I still don't see him staying with AEW. I think that he's kind of been given the opportunities that they've wanted to afford him, and for one reason or another, it's not worked out every time that they've given him the opportunity. Not always his fault, I should say. But I think that like they've given him ample opportunities and it's just not worked out there. And I think that it could work out better in the WWE environment.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
That's a good list.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see how many of them re-sign all in a row and how bad this list is soon enough, I'm sure. um, So that's my list. We haven't come up with a name yet for it. How about you all listening? Let us know what you think about the list. If there's somebody that you would add to it or take off, and if you have a snazzy name for it, let us know. Uh, Before we get into who gone up and down the tier list, though, how about we take a quick break here, Doug?
That sounds like a plan.
All right, cool. We'll be right back with the WrestleWatch podcast in just a moment. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the WrestleWatch podcast, the only podcast that we talk about free agency in the world of pro wrestling. I'm Ryan, and that's Doug. I think we want to go through the tier list. There's not been a lot of changes with the tier list, so this segment's actually going to probably be the shortest it's ever been. Like, for example, everybody in S tier, no new news. We're just waiting on all of them to debut wherever they're going to debut. So how about we have some fun with looking at who has moved up and down? How does that sound to you, Doug?
Sounds good. So before we do that, how about I'm just going to read through the current tier list just so everyone knows where everyone's at.
Okay, cool.
So S tier right now, we have Camille, Jacob Fatu, Motor City Machine Guns, Eric Rowan. In A tier, we have nobody.
Mm.
In B tier, we have grizzled young veterans, Shelton Benjamin, Mustafa Ali, Katsuhika Nakajima, and then Ricky Starks.
And I'll jump in here and say that we might have some things to talk about with Mustafa Ali, but maybe not this segment.
Yes. And then C tier, we have Leo Rush, Matt Hardy, Sheamus, Cameron Grimes or Trevor Lee, Hikuleo, and then Speedball Mike Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
D tier, we have Malakai Black, Matt Cardona, Dustin Rhodes, Jeff Hardy, Jinder Mahal, Tekla, and Kevin Owens. And then the F tier, which has become the largest tier right now.
the bucket.
Yes, Sari, Utami Hayashishita, Hook, El Phantasmo, Natalia, Nikki Bella, Becky Lynch, Sammy Callahan, Ethan Page, Gigi Dolan, Buddy Matthews, and Kaito Kiyomiya.
Woo. Oh, that's a long list there.
Yes.
And
So,
I think two of them might move up and down after this coming weekend shows of Stardom and Marigold, by the way. But
yes, we'll have those discussions then. So, starting with the list, the first one we have is Speedball Mike Bailey, who debuts in C tier.
yeah.
So, obviously, this came up because his contract is coming due. It was reported that he'll be up soon. And he is someone I feel is quite possibly the hottest free agent coming up outside of Will Ospreay this year. Like, I think that he's just an incredible in-ring talent, someone who's incredibly consistent. I think he's someone who would thrive in any environment he's in, and he has thrived in any environment he's in. And because of that, I think he'll have a lot of suitors. And because he has a lot of suitors, I think he's going to end up in one of the big two. And because of that, I think that C tier is incredibly low. I went full A.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, so I did not vote A. I voted for C. So everybody agrees with me.
I see that. So
No.
I need to explain this because I do not see how there's a 50-50 shot that Mike Bailey is either staying in TNA or going somewhere else. I think it is a very, very likely that he is going somewhere else. So that is my argument.
So my argument is that, as you pointed out, he is possibly the hottest free agent of this year, the one that is going to have the biggest possible bidding war of 2024. And to have a bidding war, I think the people that have him right now are definitely going to be trying to keep him. Now, of course, this year or last year even, we had TNA putting out some big money contract offers out to CM Punk and to Will Ospreay. Of course, they didn't go for those contract offers, but it means that they have the potential to do that. And I think that if anybody on their roster, I'm gonna be very bold with this, and I cannot wait for people that are listening to say how terrible of a statement this is. But I think of everybody on the TNA roster, he is the one person that they need to lock down and build around.
Okay. I could see that. That's a fair argument. I guess we will
So
see who's right.
yeah, but I totally agree that he's going to get interest from literally every promotion. I would love to see him in New Japan. Honestly, I think that that would be the best environment for him, in my opinion. I think that he could move up the card as far as he wants to in New Japan. AEW, obviously, it fits right like a glove. WWE is the one where I'm not so sure on, but I just think that his style and his size are not usually pushed highly in WWE, but I think that they're going to have interest in him.
I think also WWE right now, maybe they want to get a scalp, like get someone from the Indies since they've not
Mm-hmm.
gotten anyone yet, and maybe they would like to. He could be their one.
Yeah,
So I think that's also possible with him.
yeah, and that's going to tease again for the last segment of today. We're going to go through the idea of the indie run. We're going to talk about that later.
Absolutely.
How about right now we though follow that up with talking about Hikuleo then because he's right next to Speedball Mike Bailey in C tier. What happened with him, Doug?
Oh boy. Okay, so here's the thing with Hikuleo. He's obviously someone who WWE has reportedly expressed some interest in. A lot of people feel like he's going to WWE as soon as his contract is up, but a lot of it's just, a lot of conjecture and just a lot of what people think he's gonna do. So I understand uh why people had him going, why they only have him at C tier as a 50-50. I think he's gonna go. I think that
Oh yeah,
I think he's going to WWE. So because of that, I went B tier with him. I think I don't know when it's going to happen, but I really feel pretty strongly that it's going to happen. So at the very least, I'm leaning towards him jumping.
yeah. I voted for B tier also. I think that's going to happen. Um, I'm not fully confident in happening, or there's no contract, out waiting for him. But like they just signed Tagaloa, like if they're gonna sign Tangaloa of all people, they're gonna try to sign Hikuleo, right? Like I know some people were like, "Oh, well, look, he just won the strong tag belts. Don't you look silly now?" And it's like, no, because don't you remember when when Tamatanga got the Never belt and then left immediately, or even Carl Anderson had the belt when he left. So I think that that shows nothing about whether or not Hikuleo is going to be leaving or if his contract is up next month, which is reportedly still is up next month. We haven't heard anything about him re-signing with New Japan. So I think that it is more likely than not that we will be seeing Hikuleo in the WWE ring specifically by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so. I think I let's say this. I don't think he's resigning with New Japan. Let's just say that.
No, I think that there's going to be a nice money offer for him if he does not sign with New Japan.
Yeah. All right.
Um, yeah, let's go down to D tier for the next movement that we saw this week, which was Kevin Owens. I think this one's pretty easy to chat about. we haven't had a lot of news about Kevin Owens. He had a little bit of an interview where he talked about, looking back nostalgically on the past and all those kinds of things, but also trying to, take advantage of the moments that he has right now still in WWE. So some people thought about that and thought, oh, maybe he's going to leave then. I still think that when you look at the general environment of everybody else getting those renewal contracts right now of, the Magnificent Seven class of people, I think that it's more likely than not that he's going to stay at this point. I voted for D tier. He is in D tier. Doug, how did you vote on this one this week?
I also voted D tier.
Oh, well, we're
I would,
geniuses.
yeah, I wouldn't be stunned if he jumped, but I think it's highly unlikely at this point. So I think that Kevin Owens is sticking around, and I don't really have anything else to say to that.
Yeah, I don't think there's much else to say. So how about we move down to the people that also moved down to F tier? How about Buddy Matthews first, since we talked about him a little bit earlier in the show? I don't know if there's much else to say other than there hasn't been much updates about Buddy Matthews. So it seemed like he was a little bit too highly put. That's my take on it. I actually did vote to remove him from the tier list just because I don't see a lot of updates with him and I don't see him having his contract up imminently. So I was like, we can take him off and put him back on when his contract is a little bit more imminent. Doug, I believe that you voted the opposite direction.
Yeah, I put him at C tier because
Oh,
once again, as I said earlier, we've seen that Tony Khan is willing to not execute these option years,
mm-hmm.
and he's willing to let people go if they want to go. And I think if he really wants to go, you know, we have a track record that shows that he probably might do that.
Yeah.
So, and I think he does want to go. So because of that, I did put him at a 50-50 because I don't know how this option year is going to work.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's why he's 50-50 for me.
That's that's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see.
And the last person that we have as an update here, who is it, Doug?
That would be Kaito Kiyomiya, who
Okay.
is dropping from D tier to F tier. I don't know. I put him at D tier still. I didn't really think anything changed. You never like it's hard to really put a judge. It's hard to judge anything that's going in Japan right now. Like all the houses seem to be kind of down. The yen is down. They're also all the promotions are trying to work together, and even that's not really drawing that well, it feels. So I don't know that I necessarily I don't want to say I don't have a pulse on it because I feel I do, but it just feels like everything is in flux right now and it's hard to lock anything down.
Yeah, I think that that's part of what's going on with him. The other thing, of course, is that he won the GHC Heavyweight Championship over in Noah. So some people are looking at that as, hey, look, ding, 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 he's not leaving. Of course, we've had other people win the top belts of their promotion, like Nakajima, and it not mean much. So I do think that there's something a little bit different with Kaito, though, that he seems to be being pushed pretty well in Noah as a central piece. So I kind of do see why people were thinking about just removing him from the tier list due to that. I voted to keep, but just put him in F tier just because I don't think that there's anything imminent about him, but I still think that I still think that we should be watching him.
Yes, I agree.
All right. So, how about we take another short break here because I think that you wanted to cover your own topic for this week, which was about the hot indie run. Is that right, Doug?
Yeah, I think I just want to have a general discussion on the state of the indies at the moment and what it
Mm-hmm.
means to, especially as we're seeing all these people getting released from WWE and saying they're going to go on these indie runs, and I kind of just want to talk about that.
Yeah, let's do that after we do a quick refill of our coffees here. We'll be right back with the WrestleWatch podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the WrestleWatch podcast, the only podcast that covers the world of professional wrestling. And I'm Doug, and I'm here with Ryan. And I want to talk about something.
Okay.
I want to talk about the world of indie wrestling as it exists in 2024. Because to give an anecdote, I was someone who attended indie wrestling fairly regularly from I'd say 2015 until the pandemic.
Mhm.
There was a year for sure that I had season tickets to AAW, which is a Chicago-based promotion. I guess it was been the 2017 when I did that, 2018, and at the time, indie wrestling was, you know, at its peak. It was at its pinnacle. We had some of the greatest matches in wrestling were happening on indie shows. WrestleMania weekend was a massive, massive deal, and that's just not the case anymore. A lot of that has to do with the pandemic. A lot of that has to do with uh, AEW existing and kind of filling that void that the indies filled before. And I think a lot of it also just has to do with the fact that the just the industry has shifted in general with what is kind of the focus. And a lot of that is, TV rights and things like that. And the individual ticket buyers aren't necessarily the same. And what is on the indies now is not what it used to be.
Mhm.
And what is drawing is not what used to draw. And it got me thinking about a lot of these releases we've had recently, where they're doing they're trying to do the same thing that we saw a lot of releases do back during the hot indie run, where we saw people like Cody Rhodes leave, or Chris Hero when he left WWE, or when Drew McIntyre left WWE the first time, or was fired, I should say, or Matt Cardona, who's probably like the big example that comes to mind, where these people would leave and then uh, they would release some type of video on Twitter where it showed them, a lot of times maybe, breaking out of a prison or something like that.
Mhm.
Or, and then they would go on these indie runs where they'd go work PWG, they'd work Bola, and they'd have like incredible matches that got all these buzz. They'd go to Europe. They'd go to Work Progress or Rev Pro. They go to Japan in some cases, and then they would have these career renaissance. And that was always the coolest period for me for
Mhm.
wrestling, I think, was that time period where just New Japan was firing on all cylinders. We had the indies that were really, really great. UK was doing awesome. That was peak wrestling for me, honestly. And that period is gone now because now you take a look at someone like and I'm you take a look at someone like Mustafa Ali, who I love Mustafa Ali, but he came back to the indies trying to do the same thing where he was going to have this great career renaissance. And the problem is the indies just aren't there anymore. Those great matchups for him just aren't there. Because if you think about Mustafa Ali and his recent run, what was his best match?
Like in WWE or on
No,
this indie run?
on this current indie run.
That's a very good question.
Can
Maybe
you think of one that has had any buzz whatsoever?
I guess the Takahashi match, maybe, but like even that, like I think there's more buzz about the match happening rather than
Yeah.
the match itself.
And exactly, and I will say this as someone who was in the building, I thought it was not a very good match.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't even
maybe.
remember what I rated it, but
Yeah,
yeah, it wasn't it was not as huge of a deal of a I gave it a
yeah,
3.5 out of 5.
yeah.
It wasn't as huge of a match that I thought it was going to be, and it was nowhere near the best match on that card. Not to say that it wasn't a good match, but it wasn't the best match on
Yeah.
that card.
Maybe now you can maybe argue his match with Gringo Loco. That was very good.
Okay.
That was one indie match that he did that kind of stands out in my mind a little bit, but that's it. And my point though, it's not his fault because
Hmm.
he is coming into an indie environment where these matchups simply aren't there. The talent isn't there right now. The big names that are going to draw people's attention just aren't there at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's across the board because you take a look at someone like Nick Nemeth. He hasn't exactly been doing indies, but he went to New Japan, he went to TNA, and even New Japan right now is kind of, it's not what he used to be. I mean, say what you will about Finley. David Finley is he's getting great heat in Japan. It's good heat. It's actual good heat. Like
Yeah.
he is over in New Japan.
He's turned the corner of getting good heat
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, but he's also not that great in ring. He's passable, and he's not gonna give you those buzzworthy matches that a lot of people were expecting for a lot of these talent who come back on the indie and say, "I'm going to show you what I can do." Now, a
Hmm.
lot of that I think is also to do with the fact that WWE has changed in the sense that it isn't necessarily about, people being held back and held down by Vince McMahon anymore. So now when they come on the indies, it's not necessarily, they don't have that same groundswell of support from people because there's a lot of wrestling fans that really love what WWE is doing right now. And there isn't necessarily a situation where people are like, well, yeah, uh, I
And
hope you do well. Now people are just like, well, yeah, I guess I understand why you didn't do well because, there was other things going on and just you didn't cut it. And there's not that support anymore.
yeah, I would also point out that it seems that it's kind of paradoxical a little bit because it should be in theory easier than ever to get buzz around you on the indies because of how much easier it is to connect with fans. Um, and so much easier for fans to watch your work everywhere. Like there really isn't a dead spot promotion other than PWG of there's just no way to watch it live when you're at home. Like you could be in India and watch a New Japan match or some show in Chicago or something like that, you know?
But even
So
PWG is like a dead promotion now. Like
well
nobody
yeah,
cares about PWG. It's
I
it's
think
wild.
I think part of it's because they stuck themselves in the past. They didn't try to update themselves to the present, you know?
Okay,
Like,
even if they were streaming, I really think it wouldn't matter.
hmm,
I feel like because I'll be honest, I don't know that the DVD thing mattered that much. If anything, I think you can make an argument that might have helped them because it helped them stand out and it made it seem like it was a bigger deal that you had to wait for the matches. Like, I'll put a pin in that because I don't know if that's the case. I'm just suggesting that. But I do think what we're looking at right now is a situation where um, the promotion itself just isn't as hot anymore.
mhm.
And I think it's for all the indies. And I think when you take a look at someone like Trevor Lee or Cameron Grimes, when he comes out, he's walking into that same situation. I don't know that he's going to have the buzz.
Do you think that it is due to the indies being without a lot of talent or without a lot of buzz to them right now, or do you think it's the talent? Because like when you look at like the way that Matt Cardona has capitalized on things, he's doing something that I think is the prototype of what all these people are going to be wanting to do. He is working as the super of the indies, so to speak. Um, Nobody else has really been able to replicate that, and I don't know if it's necessarily because there isn't the ability to, because he's been able to do it. So that's my like thought to pose to you. Is it that they just haven't been able to grasp the opportunity like he has?
I think that's part of it. And I also, and it kind of is a good transition to my next point. I think a lot of it is because AEW exists.
Hmm.
I think that AEW has taken up a lot of the people's time that would otherwise have been devoted to indie wrestling or even Japan. Because right now there was a situation I think where people watched WWE and then they had their indie. Now it's WWE and AEW or something along those lines. That I think a lot of people don't have the attention for three, where it would
Okay.
be WWE, AEW, and something else. And then the other thing that I think a lot of people point to with AEW is the idea that they allow their talent to work indies. And I know when I initially heard that and saw that AEW was allowing their talent to work on the indies, I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be like a real boom for the indie promotions because they're going to be able to bring people to indie show. They're going to be able to advertise like actual talent that are on TV for these indie shows, and that's going to like really help. And it's funny because I feel like it didn't at all
I thought
because
it
I
did.
I don't know. I feel like shows are like okay, think about like Pro Wrestling Revolver,
Yeah.
which regularly books John Moxley.
Yeah.
All right, I
There's
don't know
no Go ahead.
how much buzz do you have for Pro Wrestling Revolver and these John Moxley matches?
Pretty I would not be watching Pro Wrestling Revolver without the John Moxley matches having happened.
But is there any buzz with them with John Moxley happening?
I don't know if right at the current moment there is, but
I
like
don't think there is.
I think there has been historically.
I don't. Okay. But I really don't think there is now. Like, I don't think it's to a marked degree over what they were before.
Hmm.
Like I feel like the indies in general are able to book AEW talent, and the ones that do, I really feel like they're still not they're 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 not getting any bump from this. Like if Willow pops up over at on Beyond, or Max Caster works Beyond. I don't know that Beyond is doing any different than they were like pre-COVID.
I mean, they might not get as much of a ticket bump from it because it's hard sometimes with those where it's like a very niche location to get people to come out to. But I think that it does get buzz enough for some people to watch those shows still.
A
Um,
bit,
I
but
don't think
it's
like
not to what I thought it was going to be, I think
uh,
is my point.
I'll also point out that I'm somebody that I was not watching wrestling essentially from like 2008 to 2020. So I started again during the pandemic when with AEW. My first show that I watched back from wrestling was Double or Nothing in 2020 with the Stadium Stampede match. So my context is I have no clue any of this period where there was the hot indies and everything like that, like from personal experience. I did not watch during that period at all.
That's fair.
Like my vantage point was somebody that grew up watching in the 90s and the early 2000s where there were two big companies. And I was able to keep up with both WCW and WWF at the time uh, pretty easily as a child. So that's what's intriguing to me is because like I came in 2020 and when indie wrestling did come back when the return to touring came in 2021, I was paying attention to the indies because of AEW because I never watched those shows ever before. And because the talent from AEW was booked on those indie promotions, I went and watched those indie shows. They didn't keep me going with watching them because I didn't have much interest personally. I didn't have a lot of interest in everything else that they were showing on those shows, but I did tune in due to AEW. And I mean, same thing with New Japan. I never watched any New Japan ever until I came back into wrestling in 2020. And now I watch all of their major shows, and the gateway was AEW. And so I think that it has personally, I think that it has benefited other promotions. I do see the point about how there is a lack of a lot of talent because they've been kind of raided from the indies over the past couple years, past 5 years. We could put it as both in AEW and WWE, like we've mentioned before with NXT. The top crop of NXT are people that were working indies, and NXT as the institution is now today, yes, they are trying to do a lot more NIL kind of people. But over the past 5 years, they too had taken a lot of people that would have been working the indies otherwise. So I think that it's not just AEW that has caused this issue. I think it's the past 5 years, the competition between the two major promotions in North America that have pushed a lot of the talent away from the indies. But at the same time, I think that I personally, this is anecdotal, I personally have had more interest in the indies due to AEW than I would have otherwise.
I think that's fair. And I will say this, I think that you're kind of describing a situation where I think we are going back to the situation where we have two promotions. And that's why we're seeing the jumps now. And that's why this show exists, is because we are back to the jumps. Before AEW, the last 20 years, we didn't really have jumps. We
No.
had people that would leave and then kind of go to the indies or somewhere else and kind of build themselves up because there really wasn't other promotions to jump to that were on that level other than maybe TNA. We have jumps now, and that's how it was in the 90s. Like people would go between WCW, WWF. Those were jumps. And then during this time period, especially during the 2010s period, we saw people go to the indies and really build up that groundswell of support. And
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to argue is I just don't know that the environment is there for that anymore.
Well, yeah, like I think that the thing to look at then is in the aughts and the teens, where it was you would go to TNA or ROH and have your little run on the super indie kind of thing, and then show everybody how great you were, and then go back to WWE, right? So like Bobby Lashley goes to TNA, shows up, shows everybody what he's about. Drew Galloway does the same kind of thing. Cody Rhodes does the same kind of thing, and they all go back to WWE. Well, Cody Rhodes has a little bit of a different path, sure, but you know that's generally what happened with all of them. They left, either they were released or something like that. They went and proved themselves, elevated themselves, and then got back into WWE. I do think that it's possible that some of the people will be doing that with the other major promotion coming up here because of their kind of developmental strategies. Them having sister brands. So let's look at an example of some of the people that were working dark and stuff like that of the women in AEW that then got signed by NXT and really elevated themselves and now are working on the main roster of WWE, like a Blair Davenport kind of person, or soon to be Roxanne Perez will be doing a similar kind of path. Like those are people that have elevated themselves, gone to the other company, gone up higher. If they were to go to be a free agent again, now they have the big, there's going to be a big push and a big bidding war, I think, for talent like that. And I think that that's like the new kind of thing to look at. It's not necessarily people going down to an indie to work themselves up and get a groundswell behind them. I think the indies do have their purpose of being a good way to sustain a livelihood and all those kinds of things. But I think that people might be looking at going to the other company, using the opportunity there to push themselves and elevate themselves so that the next time that their contract is up, they can have a little bit of a bidding war.
Yeah. And I will say this, and this will be kind of like my last kind of point on this, and to kind of hammer this home. And you mentioned, I do agree, a lot. AEW did bring a lot of attention to other promotions. They brought attention to Tokyo Joshi Pro. They brought attention to New Japan, and you could argue right now they're bringing attention to Stardom,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they are. But at the same time, people only have so much attention, and I do think that, especially in the case of New Japan, I think AEW took away a lot of people that were watching New Japan. And I think in 2018, which I would argue is probably the peak of when people were watching New Japan from the West, then I was learning that Jericho, Kenny Omega, Wrestle Kingdom 12 era.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think there are more people watching New Japan today and that once again, that's not because of all AEW. I think New Japan has just kind of faltered and didn't do well during the pandemic. I think a lot of people fell off from that, but I do think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that people only have so much of an attention span, and I don't think they can watch more than two major promotions. And once AEW existed, a lot of people that were watching New Japan stopped watching New Japan and then replaced that time with AEW.
I think it's also possible though that like another example of this is when Kenny Omega went over to TNA for a little bit of time and had the Impact belts, right? Um, it brought eyes and it brought attention to Impact. They had their biggest buy rates in years because of Kenny Omega and with the relationship from with AEW. But once Kenny and the relationship ended, people just stopped watching it. And I think that says more about what product they were showing otherwise than it does say, that Kenny ruined them or anything like that. Like, I think that he brought the eyeballs and then the eyeballs just didn't stay for whatever reason.
Yeah. And I
So,
also, and to
yeah.
be fair, and I'll be fair with that one. I feel also during the pandemic, it was such a weird anomaly of a time that it's hard to really make comparisons and trying to extrapolate beyond that. So I don't even necessarily want to blame anyone for that time period because I do think that it did. Yeah, I agree. It did help TNA, I think, especially during that time. And I don't think it was a net negative for anyone in that situation, to be completely honest.
Oh no, I don't think it was a
Yeah.
net negative, but like they weren't able to retain those new viewers, you know,
Hmm.
like they could have been. And I think that that's just like I don't want to be too negative on TNA, but I think that's a reflection of what other stuff they were doing on the shows, and maybe it just wasn't lining up with what people were hoping for when they were coming in with Kenny Omega and you know like their AEW mindset to go watch TNA. Like it just wasn't the same audience that they were trying to attract, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Uh,
And then I don't know if I have anything else more to add. I think that was my point. I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
got it
No,
all.
I think it's interesting to see about the possibility of people trying to be that indie super kind of thing and try to build themselves back up to you know get a fatter contract. But I think that also that some people might just enjoy running around on the indies, you know? So I think that will be interesting to see where it goes with Mustafa Ali, with Grizzled Young Veterans, with theoretically with Jinder Mahal. There's some interest allegedly for him getting booking with places like GCW, which I guess is the biggest indie, I suppose, right now. So we'll see what happens coming up here if these kinds of people generate buzz and go back to a major promotion, or if they just stick around and keep on working on the indies.
Absolutely. All right. And
But with
then,
all that, yeah, I think that we're done, right?
yep. So we'll be back to record again on this weekend after we do the tier list again, and then we'll see what other news comes up because I'm sure we're going to get something.
Yes, I'm sure now that we've spoken into existence, watching these indie people and a list of people from AEW that might jump. I'm sure we're going to get news on all of these people this week now that we've cursed it.
Yes. All right. So with that, I'm Doug.
And I'm Ryan. Thank you so much for listening to WrestleWatch, the only podcast where we follow free agency in the world of pro wrestling. Please make sure to like, subscribe, all those kinds of fun buttons on whatever platform you're listening to this on. And we'll be back next week. All right. Take care.
Bye. Have a good week, everyone.